Hello everyone. This week we're going to look at the philosophy of Ayn Rand. Rand claims that capitalism and self-interest are the best ways for human beings to achieve excellence and display and exercise their virtues. By contrast, she criticizes socialism and any ethics which encourage selflessness as inherently evil. Her philosophy has gone on to influence many people in America and around the world, so it is definitely worth taking her ideas seriously to see where people are coming from. Okay, so a little bit of background. Rand was born in St. Petersburg, Russia, 1905. As a young girl, she was living in a bourgeois middle-class household. Her father owned a pharmacy, she had private tutors, she was given music lessons, she was taught how to write, she excelled at writing from a young age. Okay? When she was a teenager, the Soviet Revolution in Russia took power. The result was the government started encroaching on her father's business, ultimately resulting in a full government takeover of her father's pharmacy. Rand left Russia and came to America. She lived the rest of her life in America, and there can be no denying that these early influences, these early events, influenced her philosophy going forward. Rand became a very influential writer in America. Her ideas about capitalism and self-interest made their way all the way to the White House. Here she is with her husband, Alan Greenspan, and President Gerald Ford. Here is Mitt Romney in his early Bain Capital days, celebrating the virtue of the pursuit of wealth. This idea that pursuing wealth, becoming rich is an exercise of virtue, is very much a reflection of Rand's ideas. Her writings have been quoted and referenced by many political figures, and there are many people in America who believe her ideas hold the key to understanding the way the world should be. Now, that being said, there are many people around the world who think that her ideas are fundamentally flawed and should be rejected. So, before we decide whether her ideas are good or bad, let's take her at her word and see what she has to say for herself. The first text we're looking at today is called The Virtue of Selfishness. And this is one of Rand's essays where she lays out her philosophy in concrete terms. Now, she's more famous for her works of fiction, where her ideas are presented in the context of plot elements and characters and so forth. So we're going to spend a little bit of time with her essay and a little bit of time with her fiction. Now, in the essay, The Virtue of Selfishness, Rand draws a contrast between altruism and self-interest. Altruism is the idea that you should live for others, that selflessness is a good thing, that the more you care about other people and the less you care about yourself, the better off you are. In contrast, Rand believes that self-interest, or looking out for yourself, is the better approach. So she's going to characterize altruism in a negative light and criticize the philosophy of altruism. Then she's going to go on to talk about why self-interest makes the most sense. So, here is how Rand characterizes altruist ethics. She says, altruism declares that any action taken for the benefit of others is good, and any action taken for one's own benefit is evil. Thus, The beneficiary of an action is the only criterion of moral value. As long as the beneficiary is anybody other than oneself, anything goes. The first thing you learn in an altruist morality is that this morality is your enemy. You have nothing to gain from it, you can only lose. Self-inflicted loss, self-inflicted pain, and the gray, debilitating pall of an incomprehensible duty is all that he can expect. Now, this notion of incomprehensible duty, like you have to do things for other people, but you don't really understand why, that's just the way that these ethics work. This is an implicit reference to Kantian ethics. Remember, with Kant, we have this thing called duty, which we don't fully understand, but we have to act as if it is a real thing. And Kant admits that it is unknowable or incomprehensible. Rand claims that this mysterious notion of duty should not be the thing which motivates us or demands our actions. What is the result of living under altruist ethics? Mutual resentment. You may hope that others might occasionally sacrifice themselves for you, as you grudgingly sacrifice yourself for them. But you know the relationship will bring mutual resentment, not pleasure. And that morally, the pursuit of values will be like an exchange of unwanted, unchosen Christmas presents, which neither is morally permitted to buy for himself. This example of Christmas presents for Rand is an interesting one to illustrate the problem with altruism. Under the traditional view of Christmas presents, you go Christmas shopping for other people. You're not supposed to be buying anything for yourself. So you have to be thinking in terms of others, spending your money on other people's happiness, and if you buy something for yourself, you should feel guilty. And then when you exchange the presents, the person you give the gift to, they probably don't really want that sweater. And then when you receive the socks or gift card or whatever it is, it's sort of you out of a sense of duty say, oh, thank you so much, this is just what I wanted, right? Rand would rather have us get rid of all of that and just buy our own presents for ourselves. Now, in today's society, most people spend a little bit of money from their Christmas budget on themselves, and Rand would be proud of that. And if anything, Rand would encourage people to go all the way to the end, just buy themselves the presents, and then maybe show up at the Christmas gathering and just parade around in their new presents or something of this nature. But you get the point. Christmas presents, in the traditional sense, represent altruism. You're doing something for other people because of a sense of obligation or duty. You have to go through the motions and so forth. Rand believes this is irrational. For Rand, we all know that this is a charade, that is all on the surface. For Rand, we all secretly would wish to just be done with Christmas, exchange of gifts, and just take care of ourselves. But no one can dare admit it, right? Because if they admit, hey, let's just not buy each other gifts, let's just buy our own gifts for ourselves, they would have to feel guilty because you can't just reject this philosophy. It's so entrenched in our culture. Furthermore, there's a cynicism that comes with altruism. Like, you give people gifts, people give you gifts, but you don't really care. It's just a superficial caring for others. Now, this is Rand's analysis of altruism. I don't know if everybody shares this sense that giving people gifts is this grudging duty that is a cynical, guilt-induced practice, but nevertheless, this is how Rand characterizes things. So Rand wants to cut to the core of our culture and say this altruism must be rebelled against. She characterizes altruism, or the idea that you should care for others before yourself, as evil. And to redeem both man and morality, it is the concept of selfishness that one has to redeem. Rand is being deliberately controversial by calling this essay the virtue of selfishness, because if you think back to elementary school, all the lessons of ethics are sharing is caring, look out for other people, don't be selfish. Rand is trying to turn that on its head and say selfishness is a good thing. Now, here is how she defines selfishness: concern with one's own interests. And then she reverts to a criticism of altruism. Altruism permits no view of men except as sacrificial animals and profiteers on sacrifice, as victims and parasites. That it permits no concept of a benevolent coexistence among men. That it permits no concept of justice. For Rand, altruism is something that poisons our minds. So, if it turns out that we're living in poverty, we are victims of the system, right? Somebody else has pushed us down and kept us down. Then we in poverty would need to be parasites on the working people, the people earning money. For Rand, we need to get rid of this mentality. We need to have a self-interested, individualistic philosophy where everyone is responsible for their own life, and whether you succeed or fail in life is up to you. Rand calls her philosophy of selfishness objectivism. She says, the purpose of morality is to define man's proper values and interests, and that concern with his own interests is the essence of a moral existence, and that man must be the beneficiary of his own moral actions. The actor must always be the beneficiary of his action, and man must act for his own rational interest. Why does Rand call her philosophy objectivism? Because for her, there are no metaphysics involved. Rand is an atheist. She does not believe in incomprehensible duty. She does not believe in God. She does not believe in the divine brotherhood of man or something like this. For Rand, the first priority for every human being is to stay alive. As such, you have to look out for yourself. You have to make sure that you are taken care of. You have to figure out a way to keep food in your body, clothes on your back, shelter over your head. Your first priority is not looking out for other people. Your first priority is your own survival. And this is dictated by the laws of nature and biology. It's an objective fact that if you aren't fed, you will not live. So, based on this brute, biological, physical fact of reality, we get a philosophy we call objectivism. You have to stay alive. You have to feed yourself. You have to look out for yourself. You cannot put your hope in other people. You cannot depend on anyone else. You cannot trust anyone else but yourself. Rand goes on to say that objectivism is rational self-interest. as she puts it, it is not a license to do as you please. It is not applicable to the altruist image of a selfish brute, nor to any man motivated by irrational emotions, feelings, urges, wishes, or whims. Now, this is a crucial subtlety that is often missed when people think about Rand's philosophy. Okay, if you wanted to make a caricature of the objectivist individual, you would think of the brutal survival of the fittest. I have to do whatever it takes to survive. If that includes killing innocent people to take their resources, so be it. If I need to pollute the environment just to make a buck, then that's what it has to be. To be as sympathetic to Rand as we can, we would assert no. Those would be irrational emotions, feelings, urges, wishes, or whims. Just because you're looking out for yourself doesn't give you the right to do whatever you want. Furthermore, Rand is principally opposed to violence. She believes killing other people, hurting other people is fundamentally wrong. So you do not get a free pass from Rand to just kill people for your own benefit, kill people to survive. This is a false interpretation of Rand's ideas, so take note of this passage. So Rand gives us an interesting hypothetical in this essay, an emergency situation. Imagine your wife is dying of some horrible illness, and in order to save her life, you would have to spend a lot of money on some procedure. Then you realize that you could take that same pile of money and save 10 other people. What are you to do? For Rand, this is a test case between altruism and self-interest. Under the philosophy of self-interest, you should look out for yourself first. You love your wife. You want her to stay alive so that you can be happy with her. So you should save her life. Under the philosophy of altruism, caring for others comes before caring for yourself. So the happiness of the 10 strangers is more important than your happiness. So under the philosophy of altruism, you would spend the money to save 10 strangers rather than your wife. Rand believes this shows the fundamental flaw of altruism. It makes life irrational to just care for others as a sense of duty. No, Rand says, we should look out for our own happiness first. Your highest moral purpose is the achievement of your own happiness. Your money is yours. Use it to save your wife. That is your moral right and your rational moral choice. The virtue involved in helping those one loves is not selflessness or sacrifice, but integrity. Integrity is loyalty to one's convictions and values. Rand presents another example, which is an interesting one for her. Now, the picture that you might have of Rand at this point is of encouraging selfishness as a virtue. Look out for yourself first. Other people don't really matter. Caring about other people is irrelevant to your own happiness, to your own goals. You could distort this to the point, within reason, of a miserly person who doesn't care about others at all. Rand discusses the possibility of charity. and it is interesting to see what she has to say. Suppose one hears that the man next door is ill and penniless. Illness and poverty are not metaphysical emergencies, they are part of the normal risks of existence. But since the man is temporarily helpless, one may bring him food and medicine if one can afford it, as an act of goodwill, not of duty. But this does not mean that one must support him from then on, nor that one must spend one's time looking for starving men to help. Please note the distinction. Under the philosophy of altruism, you must always be trying to help other people. Every extra dollar that you have, you should be looking to donate to charity, do something for somebody else. This is irrational for Rand. Rand would go so far as to call it suicidal, because if looking out for yourself over others is evil, then you would even give your means of survival away to help others. But does this mean Rand wants us to be totally self-absorbed and never help anybody else? No. If you have the ability to help others, and you do it not from duty because you feel like you have to, or that you feel guilty and you must do it, if as an act of goodwill you want to help others, Rand believes this is acceptable. Rand just does not want us to feel like helping others is something that we have to do, that it's our responsibility to look out for others, because there are billions of people in the world. If we were constantly trying to help others, we would not have any resources left for ourselves, and this would be irrational. For Rand, it only makes sense that every person looks out for themselves first, and then, if they have the ability to help others out of goodwill but not duty, then this would be fine. Rand is working on a couple different levels with her philosophy. What we've seen so far is essentially a moral philosophy. What should you, the individual, do with your life? How should you treat others? How should you individually think about the world? But of course, this is meant to be the foundation to a larger political and economic philosophy. Once you understand that altruism is irrational and self-interest is rational, this should then extend to your political views and how you look at the overall economy. Rand believes that the political structure should encourage individualism, the individual pursuit of self-interest, and should not in any way inhibit individuals from pursuing their own goals so long as they're not hurting others. One's sole obligation towards others in this respect is to maintain a social system that leaves men free to achieve, to gain, and to keep their values. Rand ultimately goes so far as to argue for a total laissez-faire political philosophy. She believes the government should have their hands off the economy. There should be no government regulation of economic activity. We should have a totally free and unregulated market. The laws of capitalism, competition, supply and demand will ultimately prove to be rational. Resources will be allocated according to the laws of economics, and the political structure should have no influence in the economy. This philosophy of laissez-faire political economics is something that has really come to the forefront of the American consciousness since the election of President Obama. With President Obama's attempt to regulate healthcare, for example, you have seen an upsurge in the Tea Party movement, this idea that the government should not tread on the individual, the government should stay out of people's affairs. So there is this groundswell of American political thinking which wants to return to a laissez-faire view of the economy. Now for fun, let's just look at an image. Gaster Lumber and Hardware. I built this business without government help. Obama can kiss my ass. I'm Ray Gaster and I approve this message. This business owner is asserting this notion that he is a self-made man. He created his own business. Therefore, the government has no right to regulate or tax him or interfere with his economic activity. What is interesting is to think about whether that is really true. Are people isolated units who create their wealth from nothing? Here is the reply found on the internet. Look at all the things that help this person make his business. Starting at the top and moving left, we have ports for import of goods, such as signs made in China, a trademark name responsible by the government. He can spell thanks to his public education. He has fair access to telephone networks. He has a taxpayer-funded road. He has a taxpayer-funded postal service. There are driving standards. There are no marauding thieves anywhere, probably because of the police. There's a proper drainage system. He has fair access to radio waves. He has internet access thanks to government research. There's standard date and time represented on his watch. Trade agreements, taxpayer-funded fire service, fair electric rates, fair access to electricity, reliable electricity, standard currency for the transaction of goods. All of this background infrastructure is regulated and in part provided by the taxpayer dollars and the government. So this idea that if left to our own devices, we could just thrive and do fine is perhaps a little bit unrealistic. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about Rand's political and economic philosophy. In her novel Atlas Shrugged, Rand imagines a future where the government is taking over too much control of the economy. The novel is about a train business and a steel business and all the inner workings thereof. As it turns out in the novel, there is a steel production company who makes the finest quality steel available. And all of the people building railroads want to buy the best steel, so they buy it from them. The government says it's not fair that only this steel company gets all the business. We need to make the other steel companies have some business too, so you railroad people are forced to buy from the inferior steel company. What is the result? At one point in the novel, there's a horrific event where a bunch of people on a train die as a result of flawed construction. So what is the title Atlas Shrugged all about? Is this idea that the economic producers decide to just quit. The capitalists go on strike. They say, okay, you don't want us to do business the way we want to do it, then we won't do business at all. The message of the novel is You need the capitalist more than the capitalist needs you. It is the capitalist who innovates and creates and makes technology possible. So instead of blaming the capitalist for all of society's ills, we should be thankful that the capitalist has created something for us to use and created jobs for us to have. Early in the novel, one of the characters, Francisco de Anconia, is at a dinner party, and he overhears a socialite, bourgeois woman talking about how money is the root of all evil. And he challenges her on this view and says, "Why do you think money is the root of all evil?" And goes on to talk about how money is a reflection of virtue. He says, "Have you ever asked what is the root of money? Money is the material shape of the principle that men who wish to deal with one another must deal by trade and give value for value. Money is not the tool of the moochers who claim your product by tiers, or of the looters who take it from you by force. Money is made possible only by the men who produce. Is this what you consider evil? Try to obtain your food by means of nothing but physical motions, and you'll learn that man's mind is the root of all the goods produced, and of all the wealth that has ever existed on earth. But you say that money is made by the strong at the expense of the weak. What strength do you mean? It is not the strength of guns or muscles. Wealth is the product of man's capacity to think. Then is money made by the man who invents a motor at the expense of the incompetent, by the ambitious at the expense of the lazy? Money is made before it can be looted or mooched, made by the effort of every honest man, each to the extent of their ability." Some people talk about the economy and wealth as a zero-sum game. The more money I have, the less you have. For Rand, money is a reflection of the creative process. Somebody creates something, imagines a new possibility, and that's what generates wealth. To trade by means of money is the code of men of goodwill. Money rests on the axiom that every man is the owner of his mind and his effort. Money demands of you the recognition that men must work for their own benefit. And when men live by trade, with reason, not force, as their final arbiter, it is the best product that wins, the best performance, the man of best judgment and highest ability. And the degree of man's productiveness is the degree of his reward. So goes the theory. The more productive you are, the more money you accumulate. The more intelligent, the better judgment, the better ability, the better performance you give, this will be reflected in your wealth. Money will not purchase happiness for the man who has no concept of what he wants. Money will not give him a code of values if he's evaded the knowledge of what to value. And it will not provide him with a purpose if he's evaded the choice of what to seek. Money will not buy intelligence for the fool, or admiration for the coward, or respect for the incompetent. Do not envy a worthless heir. His wealth is not yours, and you would have done no better with it. Do not think that it should have been distributed among you. Loading the world with 50 parasites instead of one would not bring back the dead virtue which was the fortune. Money is a living power that dies without its root. Or did you say it's the love of money that's the root of all evil? To love a thing is to know and love its nature. To love money is to know and love the fact that money is the creation of the best power within you, and your pass key to trade your effort for the effort of the best among men. The lovers of money are willing to work for it. They know they are able to deserve it. Run for your life from any man who tells you that money is evil. That sentence is the leper's bell of an approaching looter. So long as men live together on earth and need means to deal with one another, their only substitute, if they abandon money, is the muzzle of a gun. Rand despises and fears violent socialist revolution. From her childhood in Russia to the world events of the 20th century, Rand sees moochers and looters and parasites with weapons prepared to overthrow the capitalist system and bring violence upon those who have wealth in the name of altruism. And this idea that violent overthrow of capitalism is a good thing is not a figment of Rand's imagination. It has actually been celebrated as some sort of victory by films like the Che biography of Che Guevara, the revolutionary in the Cuban Revolution. This idea that violent overthrow of capitalism is somehow something to be celebrated. For Rand, this is the worst manifestation of altruism. This idea that being violent in the name of selflessness somehow makes violence justified is the reflection of how crazy things have gotten. Rand wants us to realize that not only is capitalism a virtue and that money is the reflection of man's intelligence and ability, but violence is always wrong, and the idea that you can justify violence in the name of selflessness is proof that altruism is ultimately a poisonous mindset. What does the violent revolutionary claim? The violent revolutionary says, the world is unfair. We will use violence to make things better. For Rand, these are the men of the double standard. The men who live by force, yet count on those who live by trade to create the value of their looted money. The men who are the hitchhikers of virtue. The violent revolutionary does not create anything. The violent revolutionary does not create wealth. They are hitchhikers of virtue. They see somebody wealthy and successful. They feel the violent attitude. They take the wealth away, but that wealth will not last. We need the capitalist. We need the innovator. We need the intelligent person to create value. And money and the accumulation of wealth is a reflection of intelligence and ability. and we need to realize this. If you claim that money is the root of all evil, you are making the means of survival evil. And if you do this, do not expect men to remain good. Do not expect them to produce when production is punished and looting rewarded. Do not ask, who is destroying the world? You are. If you look at the movement of Occupy Wall Street and these occasional outbursts of economic protests, think about what the end game is. What would they want the world to look like? In the mind of the economic protester, it is unfair that the 1% has accumulated so much wealth. They would like to take that wealth back and redistribute it amongst the people. Live in a more just and equal society. But what happens the next day? Who's going to go to work and generate more wealth? And what happens when some people are more skilled at their jobs than others, and some people accumulate more wealth than others? What will you do then? Will you take the wealth away from the successful? Then what happens after that? The people who would generate wealth would feel, what's the point? Why should I bother expending the effort to generate wealth if it's just going to be taken away from me? This is the moral of Atlas Shrugged. We have to realize that we should not bite the hand that feeds us. We should not make money evil, because money is a reflection of the human ability to be creative and productive. These protests want to make the pursuit of wealth seem like some sort of immoral, unethical, zombie-like thing. But you need to eat. You need to have shelter. You have to be productive to earn a living. So what is so wrong about pursuing your own survival? And if you're successful at your attempt at being productive and you're able to accumulate more wealth than other people, what is so wrong about that? It's only a reflection of your success and your ability to be productive and innovative. Here is the perfect reply to the Occupy Wall Street movement. Get a job. Occupy a desk. You have all this time to stand around protesting. Why not fill out a job application? We have to work for our living. What makes you think you're any better? Rand believed that America was the world's greatest hope. To the glory of mankind, there was, for the first and only time in history, a country of money. And I have no higher, more reverent tribute to pay to America, for this means a country of reason, justice, freedom, production, achievement. For the first time, man's mind and money were set free, and there were no fortunes by conquest, but only fortunes by work. The self-made man, the American industrialist. Now, those of you familiar with American history might ask yourself, is this true? Of course, there is some truth to this idea of the self-made man, the American industrialist, the person who started out with nothing and created a fortune for himself. But were all the fortunes made in America made by reason, justice, and freedom? Or were there some fortunes made in America by conquest? If you ask Rand to name the proudest distinction of Americans, she would choose because it contains all the others. The fact that they were the people who created the phrase to make money. Americans were the first to understand that wealth has to be created. The words to make money hold the essence of human morality. If you are interested in the idea of wealth creation in the American sense, please watch the film There Will Be Blood, directed by Paul Thomas Anderson. This is a fantastic meditation on self-interest, the creation of wealth, and what it takes to succeed. Until and unless you discover that money is the root of all good, you ask for your own destruction. When money ceases to be the tool by which men deal with one another, then men become the tools of men. Blood, whips, and guns, or dollars. Take your choice. There is no other, and your time is running out. If nothing else, Rand certainly knows how to write a dramatic piece of text. Let's do a thought experiment and ask ourselves, what would Rand say, and what might someone who distorts Rand say? XYZ company can save $100 million a year by dumping waste into a river. The EPA would fine them $50 million if they found out. What would an objectivist do? I must remind you of previously in the lesson where we saw Rand say that we must be self-interested to a point. We cannot give in to irrational urges, wishes, or whims. And I would argue, to be sympathetic with Rand, that she would not want us to just dump waste into the river to save money. That this would be irrational. That being said, I can also imagine an objectivist capitalist who privately, secretly would say, who cares about the environment? If I can make more money by dumping the waste into the river, so be it. Furthermore, the environment is an inhospitable force. Who cares about it? So, to be charitable to Rand, we could say she would not want us to pollute because it's irrational, but within Rand's philosophy of self-interest, we could imagine somebody who takes her at her most self-interested and would claim that this would be an acceptable pursuit of wealth. By contrast, what would Kant say? Would we will this to be a universal law? Would we want every company to pollute if it could make them some money? Well, it seems like this would lead to a rather disgusting environment, potentially deadly. It seems that Kant would claim we have a duty to care for the environment. We have a duty to each other to keep the world in a somewhat livable way, so it is unacceptable to dump into the river. Furthermore, dumping into the river would be a reflection of pure inclination and self-interest. And remember, with Kant, the thing that you are doing for self-interested purposes is ultimately the thing which is unethical. Now let's do another one. A new law requires businesses to give part-time workers 5 paid days off a year if they work 30 hours a week. Up to this point, ABC Company had several part-time workers working up to 35 hours a week. To save money, ABC Company cuts existing part-timers down to 25 hours a week and hires more workers. How would an objectivist evaluate this? Of course, you can all imagine what Rand would say about the boss's actions here. Of course they should do this. Of course they should do whatever it takes to make as much money as possible. If anything, their crafty decision to cut hours and hire more people is a reflection of their intelligence. Therefore, they should be rewarded by the cost savings. There's also a lesson for the part-timer in this from Rand. Rand would say to the part-time worker, don't feel upset at your employer. They have to do what they have to do to survive, and so do you. It's about time you look for another job, or perhaps try to get full-time at this employer. And just for good measure, how would Marx evaluate this? He would, of course, not be surprised at all. Of course, the capitalist would do anything they can to maximize profits and minimize employee benefits. This is the cold, heartless nature of capitalism. Perhaps the workers should rebel and overthrow the business owners and take it into their own hands. At which point they would do what? Give everybody full-time and paid days off and vacation time, etc. And then perhaps productivity would go in what direction? The lesson from Rand is that the pursuit of wealth, the pursuit of self-interest, is not something to be ashamed of. It is not something to be vilified. It is something to be celebrated. We should all want to be wealthy, not because we inherit wealth or we win the lottery or we take it from somebody else. We should want to be wealthy because of our abilities, because of our virtues, because of our productivity. This is the idealized vision of capitalism. Furthermore, when you look at the world around you and you see all of the technological innovations that we have, who do you have to thank? The capitalist. It is the pursuit of wealth and the pursuit of self-interest that has made the world we live in so fantastic. This is the idealized version of capitalism, the idealized version of self-interest. I leave it to you to decide how to evaluate it.